Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Akil, and for today's episode, we talk about empathy-driven software development. Empathy is sometimes hard to explain, but luckily my guest Andrea Goulet lays out the practical benefits of empathy in software development. I'll put all the links to her socials in the description below, and with that being said, enjoy the episode.
Beyond coding.
Yeah, Corgi has been remote for 9 years.
Really?
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So we were doing it before it was cool.
I love when everyone says that. Yeah.
Yeah,
You can say that now.
Yeah, and I posted I recorded a class on LinkedIn Learning in 2019 about how to lead a remote software team. And so it was like that was good timing. So yeah.
That makes sense.
But yeah, it's a good world, and I think there's a lot of places where you can absolutely make it work. But at the same time, like there's value in personal connection.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, in real life. And then I think remote working, it makes it intentional, right? And then when you do connect with your colleagues in real life, it's,
you try and make the most out of it
because you make the most out of it. Exactly. Yeah. So
yeah. I completely get that feeling. I mean, I joined different projects completely remote with people I hadn't seen physically. And it wasn't up until like months later that we actually saw each other that I was actually like, man, you're like 2 meters tall. Like
I know that's the biggest thing is the height.
Yeah.
I have, we typically bring our team together once a year because we've got people all over the world. But we haven't been able to the past 2 years because of the pandemic. So there's people I've worked with for actually, because we weren't able to do it the year before because we had some financial challenges. So I have people I've worked with for like 3 or 4 years, and I haven't met them in person.
That's even longer. Yeah.
You can make it work. You can totally make it work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How much of your time is spent now working on the book, actually? Because I've never written one. It seems like a humongous task.
It is huge. It is the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
And that includes giving birth to 2 children.
Oh
yes. It's really hard. I think some of it is the topic.
Okay.
The topic that I'm talking about is incredibly big.
Yeah.
And it's something that people haven't written about before.
It's vague, right? It's not tangible to a lot of people.
It is to a lot of people. And so, like, how do you take this really big thing, empathy, that nobody understands? And how do you take this thing, software, that you can't really touch, like the back end, most people, right? And then how do you mix them together? And then you get even more nebulous and then try to make it like concrete and relevant. So it's been like one of my friends describes it as like sculpting clay.
Okay.
Where it's like you have to keep reforming it and stuff like that. But then eventually you get there and you get the details. So the structure is very much in place.
Yeah.
I'm actually launching my first course in August. So we're working on getting the website up in the next week or so, hopefully. So, I definitely like have now like a template, and I've been writing. I have over 150,000 words that I've written.
Okay. That sounds like
a lot. It is a lot. I mean, it's over 350 pages of content, but
that's huge.
Being able to like put it in a narrative and make sure that it makes sense. That's where I am now.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, if I imagine myself in that position, already sometimes writing an email that I think is important, I go over it a bunch of times just to make sure it is kind of perfect, or it's at least where I think it should be. And I think if you do that with a book, right, if you strive towards that perfection, it's going to take a long, long time before you actually get there. Like, are you consciously like doing that with kind of the things that you're writing, that you're like, okay, this might not be perfect, but I think it is kind of hitting all the points that I want it to hit?
I think one of the things that surprised me is that the things that I thought I knew going into this ended up being wrong.
Okay.
So,
in what way?
So this is actually something that's very common in research. So you go in kind of with a theory, but then like I'm doing a very research focused approach. So there's a lot of academic literature that I'm looking at, because I didn't want to just be like, this is my experience. Like I wanted everything to be really grounded. And so some of the ways that I was thinking that empathy worked, or like the way that we construct emotions, they actually, neuroscience shows that that's not really the case. Like
Okay.
there's more and more evidence that actually but it's made it really cool. So there's one neuroscientist who's done a significant amount of research on how emotions are made. She actually has a book with that title.
Yeah.
And it turns out that they're instantiated just like we do with object-oriented programming.
Okay. That's interesting.
So, yeah. And so, like, I thought that emotions happen to us. I
Yeah.
thought there were universal facial expressions. And she walks through how some of the things that are very well known and very well replicated may not actually be the way that things work because of some of the methodology that was used and what the neuroscience tells us. So what we have with emotions is we have feeling patterns in our body.
Okay.
And that's, so we have kind of attributes, and that is called interoception. That I didn't know that word before.
Yeah, me neither.
But feeling pattern in your body means
Yeah.
interoception, right? So for me, like, you know, when I get angry, let's say, sometimes like I go quiet,
Okay.
right? Like I
Yeah.
go inward, and some people go outward, right? So there's not
That's
like a
me.
universal,
Yeah.
some people like rage, and that's what everybody thinks. But what happens is that we rely on behavioral strategies that have worked for us. So
Yeah.
our brains are just prediction engines that are constantly like figuring out how to navigate the world and keep us safe based on our prior experience. Yeah, so for me, it's like I've learned to kind of like
Yeah.
be really calm, diffuse the situation,
Yeah.
get away, and then get angry or like vent or
Exactly.
something. So,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't be able to tell from my outward expression that I'm angry, but that's the way I'm feeling inside. And
Interesting.
so in these conversations, it's like duct typing, right?
Okay.
Like we instantiate an emotion and then name it at runtime. And it's like, and then our behaviors get called too. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, you know, and so when we can start thinking of things in that way, and it's actually really neat too, because diving into the history of kind of computer science as well, like
Yeah.
Alan Kay was a biologist. He was the one who developed object-oriented programming.
Yeah.
And he looked at like cells and like how can we make things that are self-replicating, and like so there's just so many commonalities, but they're not obvious.
No.
And I think that's what has surprised me, and that's what's taken longer.
Okay.
Is that what I thought I knew going into this? I mean, there's kernels of truth in it.
Yeah.
But we're in a golden age of neuroscience,
Yeah.
where we've got neuroimaging that is helping us really understand, because prior to, mid 2000s, we didn't have anything other than behavior and other than people's verbal descriptions of what motivated them.
Yeah, that was it. We just have to
And
trust
it turns out that like the things that we say are motivating us, sometimes we rationalize, but that's not actually what it is.
Yeah.
So we're able to like get all this new data, and it's revealing a bigger picture. And so I wanted to make sure that all of that good content was in the book. But it's taken a lot to wrap my brain around so that I can share it. But it's
I get that.
fun. I really like it. I can't wait until it's done.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it is a complex topic. And to me, it's not been obvious. It's only when I've talked to a lot of people, even on this show, that they're like, oh, software is actually a lot analogous to biology, much more so than we thought. And it's not as black as white. And it is kind of an organism that keeps growing until it either reaches an end or never actually reaches an end. And I'm like, man, that does make a lot of sense. And it aligns with what I've seen in projects and organizations. And I think the more we draw those comparisons, the more we actually understand what is going on, and the better our judgment becomes towards the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like, it is like biology, especially object-oriented programming. Like, it is directly designed to be like biology.
Yeah.
So that was the intent behind it. And Yeah, I absolutely think, so Donella Meadows has a great book on systems thinking.
Yeah.
Like it is exactly, if you're looking to get into systems thinking, it's not too long. She explains things so clearly. It was actually published after her death by several colleagues.
Okay.
And like she just describes how, like, just what a general system does. And
Yeah.
software is 100% a system, right? We've got things like, so one of the things that is critical is interconnections,
Yeah.
right? That's really what makes a system different than like a group of objects. And so
Exactly.
sometimes you'll hear in software teams, like, do you have a team or a collection of individuals?
Yeah.
Right. So if you've got like, so the difference would be like, if you have just rocks on the side of the road, they're not doing anything
No.
together. Like one rock isn't influencing the other.
Yeah.
Right. So that's an example of just like a group of things.
Yeah.
But in a team, there's interactions, and we have to be very intentional. And then we can also look at systems. There are a couple other important things are stocks. So like the way she describes this is a bathtub,
Okay.
right? So we measure the amount of water, right? And then you have inflows and outflows. And so you have things that increase the stock. You have things that decrease the stock.
Yeah.
Those are called balancing loops. So those are the feedback loops that we constantly want. And so we can actually control how to make things a virtuous cycle, or how to get more of the thing we want, or what are the things that will get us less. So in a bathtub, we've got the faucet, right? And we've got a drain. And so that's very easy to visualize. But in a software system, like my background, I have a really interesting kind of like history, which brought me to here. So I spent the first decade of my career as a copywriter to really understand empathy, which is why I thought I knew about it going in. You can't really sell things through writing unless you understand the perspective of the person you're writing to.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then I spent past 12 years, almost 13 now, diving into legacy code systems and figuring out how to modernize technical debt. And what I discovered is that empathy is the key to being able to pay down technical debt.
Interesting.
It's just the thing that people don't see.
No.
It's like the root system. Like we see the thing on top, but we don't see the thing underneath that really is giving a system the nutrients. And so,
what do you mean by that then? Like, can you give an example towards that?
Yeah. So the way that I define legacy code, most people think of Michael Feather's definition of legacy code as code without tests.
Yeah.
He wrote that in Working Effectively with Legacy Code. And I think that's accurate, yet incomplete. So the way that I describe legacy code is that it's code without trust, right?
Okay.
And tests help us build trust.
Yeah.
But when we go into and that's trust in the code base, right? So for example, if you're relying on some documentation about how to deploy, but it's inaccurate, like you can't trust then that the rest of the documentation is going to work.
Exactly.
Right? So then you have to spend extra time, and technical debt is it's friction, right? It's friction between your idea and getting it out into the world. And so if we can increase the amount of trust, both in the code base and in our teams, then we can achieve a healthier code base. So trust becomes the stock, similar to how we have the bathtub metaphor, right? So trust is kind of the water. And when I say trust, I am using justified trust. Like there's a whole philosophy is another area I had to go into, right? Because trust can be something that can be misused. Charles Feldman in his book, The Thin Book of Trust, I love his definition. It's trust is making something that you value vulnerable to another person's actions. So vulnerability is an inherent part of trust. And so when I say trust, it's in the assumption that trust has been built and we know that people aren't going to take advantage, right? So you've got like con artists and people like that who prey on people. That's not what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
Right? So justified trust. So what are the things that are going to increase trust? And then what are the things that are going to decrease trust? And that is where empathy comes into play. So we can look at things like some of the things that erode trust faster than anything
Yeah.
are shame, right? Contempt.
Yeah.
And there's research from social scientists that demonstrate a lot of these things. So John Gottman, he has a book called The Science of Trust. And so he's studied marriages for 40 plus years.
Okay.
And is able to predict with a high degree of accuracy how, like, which couples are likely to get a divorce based on the way they communicate with each other.
Interesting.
And what he found is that contempt, which is the feeling that you are better than someone else,
Yeah.
and kind of talking down to someone, right, and dehumanizing them in a way.
Yeah.
Like, there are various degrees of it. That is the thing that will destroy a relationship the fastest.
Really?
Yeah. Brene Brown has great research on shame.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like, so, and it's interesting because when I came into software, I was kind of blissfully ignorant of the culture. And so, because I had been in marketing, and but for the most part, it was different. Like, people collaborated, and there were disputes. But when I came into software, like, my business partner was like, "Oh, just go on to Stack Overflow and figure it out."
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh my God!" Like, people use shame and contempt as a weapon in software. It is very prevalent. And I think that is the thing that defines our toxic tech culture.
Yeah, that's where the toxicity comes from. I think I've been very lucky in that I haven't had it like that. Like, I would always, so I started in a very junior position. I didn't know anything, right? I didn't know anything. I said everything, but I meant anything. Meaning, to me, it was obvious that the other people far surpassed me in whatever we were doing. For them, it was always obvious also, except they never showed it to me. Whenever I had a dialogue with someone, they said, we are colleagues, right? We are equals. Hierarchy doesn't matter. We're in the same team. Let me show you how to do this, right? They really took me beside them and helped me learn and grow that way. And I think if it was any other way, if it was any other people, it wouldn't have been the same. And it would have been more of an uphill battle. So I do feel like that trust was always there inherently.
Yeah.
Just put my mind at ease so much more.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's wonderful. I think, and I think that different people experience this in different ways, right? Like, and also culture has a lot to do with it. So you're in the Netherlands, right?
Yeah.
And so collectivism, right, is more of a value here than here in the United States, where individualism and individual contribution tends to be kind of a national value.
Okay.
So that plays into it. It's incredibly complex.
Yeah.
But here's the thing with empathy is that we are really good as software developers at taking a domain and breaking it down into its component parts, understanding how they all relate to each other. Like, we do this all the time with domain mapping. And so that's kind of where I've been going with the book. That was kind of the light bulb moment when I was like, oh, if we use decomposition, then maybe we can make this work.
Yeah.
So when we look at empathy, the research tells us that it actually has 4 component parts.
Okay.
So the first is it's called empathic concern.
Yeah.
Which is actually caring, right? It's the motivation. Like, if you don't have this is sometimes called compassion, right? And in the book, I break it into 3 distinct things. Compassion, which is the desire to relieve another person's suffering. And this is something that you can cultivate, which then gives you the motivation to do the other things that are required in empathy.
Yeah.
Attunement, which is from John Gottman's research, which is being able to have an interpersonal relationship and build that trust as opposed to degrading it. And there's some specific ways to do that. And then also altruism. And that was another place that blew my mind, where there's a lot of research on how altruism can be very, very good, acting in a way that's pro-social, where you help people. But if it comes out of a place of distress, where you're feeling distressed, it can actually hurt people. there's a whole field of study called pathological altruism, which is where, people take it to the extreme and then become violent because they feel like they're protecting someone. That's an example. So understanding, again, the nuance. So that's the first part is caring and understanding and kind of anchoring yourself of, am I in a good place to actually form an empathetic relationship with someone?
Yeah.
The next is emotional regulation. So this is why emotions come in. And so being able to calm yourself down, right? And with this, it's, about setting boundaries. That was actually a huge, huge one. And let me actually just pull up the other ones there. So we've got boundaries, and then we also have heightening your awareness, right?
Okay.
So this is where kind of mindfulness comes in, where, it's being able to pay attention to what is going on in my body. Oh, I'm feeling my heart pace faster. Why is that? What's going on? And being able to slow down and just be present and learn to notice. And then also regulating your empathic capacity. So with that, like, our ability to empathize is a metabolically, like, really expensive activity.
Okay.
It requires a lot of brain power. That we have, and that's a fixed amount. Like, we only have so much. Our brain can't generate more electrical energy to do these things. So we have to make sure that we are managing our stress, that we're eating well, right? That we're sleeping. All of those things also contribute to our ability to empathize.
Interesting.
So once we've developed a place where we are anchored in genuine motivation, we are calm, the next is consideration. So this is described as cognitive empathy. And so this is the empathy that I learned as a marketer, which is being able to take another person's perspective in a thinking way.
Okay.
And so with this, you start to see things that pop up in UX, like mental models, right? And so, being able to map out, an accurate description of how somebody else is feeling. And so we do this in several different ways. But we also have merge conflicts, right? In the same way, where, like, our internal belief about something may not match the evidence.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, what do we do? Right. And so this is where bias comes in. This is where logical fallacies come up, right? We see this in priming, right? So, for example, if you're a realtor and you want to sell a house, one thing that a lot of people do is they bake cookies 30 minutes before people show up. And
So it smells good.
Yeah. And that's called cognitive priming,
Okay.
where it's a way to basically help people remember, elicit, good memories and things like that. And so there's a fine line there between, what's kind of helping someone get into the space where they can make their own decision, and what veers into manipulation, where you're no longer giving people a choice, or you're guiding them down a path that they're unaware of. And then we also have ethics, right? So we need to be able to recognize, like, what's our impact on society? Are we making decisions that are fair, moral, and just? Right. And so there are ethical frameworks to consider. And then once we've got all that, right, then we look at communication, right? And so that becomes the artifact, like the thing that we produce. So similar where test-driven development, we've got tests, and that's like the thing. With behavior-driven development, we're working with scenarios, and that's the thing. With empathy-driven development, we're working with communication, and specifically communication artifacts, things that are durable, right? Things that you can leave behind, because that is going to be something that builds trust. And then when we can do this in this way, another thing is looking at networks, right?
What would an artifact look like?
So an artifact can be like a commit message. That's the one I typically look at, right? So let's say that you're using some kind of automated tool. And, you're going in and just kind of like not even paying attention to the commit messages, right? And let's say that your future self a year from now is like, oh man, there was a bug in here. Well, commit messages can be one of the best tools for reconstructing historical knowledge about what happened in the code base, because everything's timestamped, right? And it's tightly coupled to the code.
Yeah.
So it's not like a wiki where things can easily get out of date, right? Like
Exactly.
it's right alongside. But it's a missed opportunity for a lot of teams, because then if you go back and the only thing that that the commit messages say are updates API, updates API, updates API,
It's all the
updates
same.
API.
Yeah.
Then it's like, well, what the heck happened? What were the decisions that were being made here? Another example is architecture decision records.
Yeah.
Right? Where if something changes in the system architecture, taking a moment to document it and say, okay, this is why we made this change.
Yeah.
And what I find is that a lot of times in legacy systems, the why is completely lost.
It's gone.
And so it's gone. And that's how we build trust in the system, is being able to recognize what was somebody thinking when they did this? What was their motivation?
Yeah.
Right. And that's how we can form compassion with somebody that we're not in the same room with, or somebody who, may not have even, we've never met.
Yeah.
Across space and time. Right.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah. And so we can look at, instead of looking at people with character flaws and looking down with them with contempt and saying, why did they do it this way?
Yeah.
Right? What an idiot. We can reframe that, and we can approach it with empathy and say, I wonder why they did it this way.
Exactly.
Let me find out. Right.
Yeah.
And it's the same word, but a different feeling. And that small shift can have a profound impact on the quality of the code, the ability to deploy, the happiness of the team, the productivity of the team, right? The feeling of belonging.
Yeah.
And there are so many positive benefits. So, that's why I think trust is that stock.
Yeah.
The different elements that I listed in, that kind of relate, that are in the decomposed empathy, I describe that as empathy system architecture. So kind of those 12 things, they move in and out, and you're constantly like, moving. And then the process that's similar to red, green refactor when we're looking at test-driven development, or, given, when, then, if we're looking at behavior-driven development.
Yeah.
Right? Then the process becomes care, calm, consider, communicate, where it's like, okay, let me anchor myself. Am I feeling personal distress? Okay. Like when you're writing an email, for example, right? Like, don't write an email angry. And when you're feeling like somebody's stupid, right? Like that's kind of basic advice. So calm down, right? And then think about how that email is going to be read. And then think about, is there anything in the way? Like, are they super busy? Are they on vacation? Right? What's in the, what aspects of the communication channel are going to be impacted? And this is another place I could totally geek out. I'm just going to give a nugget here, where Shannon Weaver was the person who in the 1930s created a generalized communication system. It is the exact same in computing as it is in communication school.
Yeah.
Not derivative. They are literally the same model. And so from there, we can look at things like entropy. So in software, when we want to generate an SSH key or encrypt something, we want something in a high entropy environment, right?
Yeah.
Where there's a lot of uncertainty. We can use those same principles by recognizing the status of the communication system. And we can look at the amount of entropy. And entropy is linked with compression. So, that's why we have long SSH keys, because they're harder, harder.
Exactly.
We can look at this with acronyms, right? So we say TDD, and I can say that because I'm pretty sure that people who are listening to this understand that.
Yeah.
If I went to my gardening club and started saying that, people would be like, what the heck are you talking about?
Yeah.
And then even if I said test-driven development, they're like, I don't understand what that is.
Yeah.
And if I said, well, it's a way of creating software that instead of writing tests and and fixing bugs after you've written the code, you do it before. And people still might be like, okay, I don't quite understand. But do you see how it's like, it's a longer explanation, but it's more clear given the audience. Yeah. And so it's those kinds of things that we can draw from our of our experience as software developers that can help us understand this really abstract thing called empathy, and we can deploy it effectively, and then we can embed it into our daily habits, and we can build up those things that are virtuous and that will create more trust. And then we can do less of, activities that breed contempt and shame and that degrade trust. And
Yeah.
then when we do that, it tends to have just a profoundly positive impact in many different areas, with the
Yeah.
code, with the teams, and also with the organization.
Yeah, when you were talking about kind of the communication artifacts, right? When it
Yeah.
went to commit messages, ADRs, and I even had pull requests in my mind. Um,
Yeah.
I know that's a good thing, right? From experience, because when you go through that, you do see like a refactor or an API change, and you're like, okay, I saw like 50 of them. That wasn't the only thing.
Right.
Or I see a general description for like a million files changed, and I'm like, there's a lot more in this. So I like leaving those breadcrumbs, right? And I teach my
Mm-hmm.
team, I teach my peers. I was also taught by my colleagues, right? Leave the why within the code, right? Leave it in a
Yes.
commit message, link it to your tickets, whatever ticket system you use. Be descriptive in your pull request. Sometimes even we had a system in
Yep.
place that you needed to add images, like this is the before, this is the after,
Yep.
so you can
Yeah.
visually see what's going on. Right? Little
Yeah.
breadcrumbs that help people understand the why. But I
Yep.
never looked beyond that and thought, actually, this is for trust building, right? This makes us more
Mm-hmm.
comfortable in the code base that we're working with, that we can go back and we can see, okay, these are the decisions that have been made, understand what's going on, and build on top of that instead of just being thrown into a black hole and building on
Mm-hmm.
top of that, right? The unknown
Yeah.
is way more scary that way. But
Yeah.
I had
Well,
never
also,
linked it to trust in that way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also around being able to reconstruct a context.
Mm.
So a good example here is linguistics,
Yeah.
right? And this is why I focus on durable artifacts, durable communication artifacts, where there's two different languages that are kind of predecessors to Greek.
Yeah.
One is linear A and the other is linear B.
Okay.
Now we can reconstruct linear B.
Mm.
We understand how it works. We understand the meaning of words, but we can't with linear A.
Okay.
We can understand the grammar. We can pick out a few words, but we are not able to reconstruct the meaning of
Interesting.
that language. And the reason is because we don't have enough artifacts. Like the data set is too small.
Yeah. We can't
And there's
relate to it.
actually some interesting math. Like there are linguists who have gone and like done mathematical models about like these are the number of artifacts that we would need in order to reconstruct this language. Right.
Interesting.
And so if you look at things like Latin,
Yeah.
right, the reason, like I took Latin in school, like, the reason that we can still teach it is because there is an abundance of data around how that language worked. So
Yeah.
it's easier to understand and reconstruct. And so in the code base, it works the same way. If you have too few artifacts, it's not a question of whether or not you're, the person working on it today is smart enough or, has enough knowledge of the
Yeah.
domain or whatever. It's that the data set of what was done before is simply too small. You can't go back and
Exactly.
reconstruct it. But if there's a very rich data set, even if you as the producer never end up using it again,
Yeah.
your commit message could be the key to helping someone 2 years from now
Yeah.
solve a problem quickly, right? And so it's getting into those habits, right? And it's finding ways. Like I'm a big fan of the book Living Documentation by Cyril Martiniere, I think is how I say his last name.
Okay.
And it talks about like how to create documentation in a way that isn't separate from what your daily activities are, right? And how
Okay.
to leave those really good artifacts, across your project in a way that isn't going to disrupt your workflow. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that I get a lot. It's like, oh, I got to do all this extra stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it can be a good reflection because stepping back and synthesizing our ideas is
Yeah.
actually a really good way to, this is why we do retrospectives and reflections. And so you can use the opportunity of writing a commit message to just take a beat and like think about what you did and why did you do it.
Yeah.
And then that helps cement or helps you learn from, what did I learn? I had an art professor once, and I had to write an essay about, it wasn't just what we had produced, but we
Okay.
also had to have an essay of like, what was your process? And then if you were to paint this painting again, what would you do differently?
Nice.
And that was such a good exercise. And I
Yeah.
think that's something we don't we do sometimes in retrospectives, but as individuals. So being able to like write in and say, I would have loved to have done this.
Yeah.
Right? That's the ideal state. However, I was under a time constraint. And so,
This is what actually happened.
Here's an article of like what I would have done.
Yeah.
Like you don't know if it's going to be used, but chances are you've got the article up. You can just add the link. There's also a really great tool, Loom, which has an integration with GitHub, and it's a way to capture screen shares really, really, really easily.
Okay.
So that's another way to kind of get rich artifacts into your code base.
Yeah. What I've noticed on my end when I write a commit message, right, when I've done that continuously, before writing the code, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this first because that's going to be my first commit, right? In and of its own, that's going to make sense. And then I structure my thoughts ahead of what I think my messages are going to be. Or sometimes, obviously, it doesn't work all the time. But when I've blurted out a bunch of code, then I'm like, okay, let me compartmentalize this because I want to be able to convey what happened here. And then I stash things, I pop things, and I make structured commit messages that way. Because I want to, for myself and for others, be able to explain what happened here, right? Because I think it's the only thing you can leave behind, right? You can't be on a project all the time. You can't be in an organization all the time. Things continuously shift and people continuously pop in and out. So I can't be there to explain verbally. First of all, I don't want to because I would be able, I wouldn't even remember myself. So I couldn't even explain it. But those are little breadcrumbs I leave for others and even for myself because weeks ahead, months ahead, I'm not going to remember what happened. It's only human, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that gets to a kind of a point that I've been looking at for the past about maybe 5 years. So, actually coming up on 6. So my business partner and we were at a conference and we found a number of other people who love legacy code. And so we started a community called Legacy Code Rocks. You can go to legacycode.rocks if you love legacy code and want to geek out with other people who do too.
Nice.
And through there, we started a podcast, we started a meetup. And what I started to really want to share was that legacy code has a really bad rap. It's like, ugh, I don't want to work on legacy code. That's shame and contempt right there.
Because people don't trust it.
It's beneath me, right? But I love Amitai Schleier's definition of legacy code, which is it's valuable code that's hard to change.
It is.
Legacy code drives your business, right? And so instead of looking at it as like, I don't want to work on that, right? Like just shifting your mindset as this is really important to the business.
Yeah.
And how can I help make our business stronger?
Exactly.
Because of it. And then it can also help you link to the past and say, okay, what have other people done? What were their constraints? And in this way, you can connect to the humanity of it in a similar way that you have a legacy as humans, like heirlooms, right? Like you think of, like I have some crystal bowls that, were passed down to me and they were my great grandmother's.
Yeah.
And just like I have that connection to someone that I never had a chance to meet through this object. And that is a legacy. That is my family's legacy. And this is a tangible object. And that same idea can be applied to code.
Yeah.
Where I'm working on this code base and on this system, and sometimes even on this file or this repo, and someone else created it, right? Who maybe worked here 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
How can I connect to that humanity in the past, but then also how can I connect to the people who will come after me so that I can be someone that helps them in the future? And so when we do these things, we're proactively motivating ourselves
Yeah.
to change the activities that we know create healthy code bases.
Exactly.
But it transforms it from a check the box activity where it's like, oh, I got to write a commit message. It's so annoying.
Yeah.
To I care about the people on my team, and I care about myself, and I care about the people who are going to come after me. So I'm going to take the time to actually document what I'm thinking. And that motivation that comes from compassion is the key difference. And so being able to train people to no longer think of empathy as a soft skill,
Yeah.
and to start thinking of it as a software skill. It is a technical skill. Oh, believe me, it's deep. You can
Yeah.
keep going for like however long you want, in a similar way that you can study like microprocessors, or you can study like system design. It is just as technical
Yeah.
if we know where to look, and if we start to use our superpowers of decomposition, where then that way we can structure it in a kind of analytical way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way you lay it out. Like, it's a legacy on a personal level is good, right? I'm building my legacy, whatever I'm leaving behind for my kids and their kids, and you want it to be as good as possible. Yet I agree with you that legacy code has a bad rep, right? And I think it does go into, okay, we don't actually trust it. We don't actually know what's going on here. We don't
Yeah.
want to figure it out, because I do think it requires time and effort to figure it
Yeah.
out. But I completely
Yeah.
agree, on the other hand, that it is valuable. So if
Yeah.
we want to be effective, if we want to be valuable, sometimes you do have to deal with legacy code, right? Because,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even my examples, and I don't know how I would fix this. I'm writing commit messages, I'm structuring my stuff. I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
convey, I'm trying to argue with my team that we should do this. And a lot of the times it works, right? We do see value
Yeah.
in that. Except we can't go back in history and rewrite things, right? I mean, factually we can, because we touch a lot of things, but you could
Yeah.
never do that, right? Lost commit messages that have no context are there and
Yeah.
are going to stay
That's
there. So you still
that's
need to
so
be able
important, that
to,
word context. That's exactly the thing. And so I
yeah,
think that's another measurable thing that can help us, if we're looking at another aspect of stock, right? That we want to create more of. Context is 100%
yeah,
something that we want to create as well.
exactly. That is the why. That is the environment we're in, also the time we're in, right? The situations
Mm-hmm.
at hand, and then we can explain the decisions we made, because you
Mm-hmm.
always make the decisions based on a lot of stuff, a lot of factors
Mm-hmm.
there. So if you can
Mm-hmm.
kind of, how do you say that? Make artifacts out of your context. I'm kind of visualizing breaking down a puzzle piece by piece,
Yeah,
so people can
exactly.
find those and kind of make the picture in
Yeah.
their own mind. Then it is valuable. But
Yeah.
I've been wondering, since we've been talking, what if you're not at that stage, right? What if there's not even a puzzle that you can create from the code that you have? What if you find yourself in a legacy situation in that way? How can you structure it and pay it forward to the future? Is it just by starting and by doing? What do you think
Yeah.
there?
I think the first thing is to start with care,
Hmm.
right? And so it's recognizing like just being motivated out of compassion
Yeah.
instead of out of like, I don't care, I'm just doing this as a job, or out of contempt where I'm better than everyone else and all the other developers are stupid.
Yeah.
Um and like it has to be my way, or
The
any
highway.
other decisions were stupid. Yeah, so I mean that's kind of the definition of contempt.
Yeah.
Um So my first suggestion is always like learn about compassion. There are tons of different practices out there. Emory University has a cognitively based compassion training, and my understanding is it's free. So you can go online, you can understand the basics of compassion, you can get some training.
Awesome.
There's a lot of books out there. There's one. So one of the most effective practices for um, developing compassion is what's called loving kindness meditation. And this comes out of the Buddhist tradition, but neuroscience backs it up that this is like a really good practice for developing compassion.
Okay.
In a secular way as well.
Hmm.
And so the practice is that you are both broadening, so you're developing flexible thinking skills,
Yeah.
but you're also looking at being a benefactor, right? And so it's you're jointly building those two skills.
Okay.
So you're fostering positive desire for other people. So, and you start with yourself. I think that's
Okay.
the other thing that people forget about empathy. It is not just about other people. You must have self-compassion.
Hmm.
Kristen Neff is the preeminent researcher on self-compassion. She's got several great books out there. So you start with yourself, and there are many different ways to do this, but typically it's saying things like, "May I be happy? May I be at peace?
Hmm.
May I be healthy? May I live with ease?"
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, that alone is hard.
Yeah. I can see that.
And that's the first step.
Hmm.
That's the first step, because I think the reason a lot of times the research shows us that people operate out of contempt
Yeah.
is because they have low self-worth, or they aren't able to send compassion inward.
Okay.
And so it's not that people who are operating out of contempt are bad people
Yeah.
and should be shamed. That's just going to make things worse.
Exactly.
It's
That's
how
gonna
can we
spiral.
help them? Yeah, how can we help them cultivate this compassion? And so then what you do is you kind of move in concentric circles outward. So
Okay.
you think of somebody that you care deeply about, maybe a family member or a close friend. And so for me, I have a good friend, Anna, right? So may Anna be happy.
Yeah.
May Anna be healthy. May Anna be calm. May she live with ease, right? And so then you maybe go to a coworker, somebody you know, but not like deeply well. And you keep going out to someone that's neutral, like maybe the cashier at your, at a restaurant. Then you move to someone that you don't have a great relationship with, like someone you're struggling. And be careful with this one. So if it's somebody that you like have had traumatic experience with or something else, like don't go there without professional help,
Yeah.
right? That's something that someone who understands how to deal with trauma should help you navigate through. But let's say that I'm having an interpersonal conflict with someone on my team, and we're just kind of like bristling against each other and not understanding each other, right? Like, may this person be happy?
Yeah.
Right? May they be healthy? And like, then it gives you the motivation to confront them and say, okay, how can we fix this? I
Yeah.
care about you, and I care about your relationship. I care about this stuff. And because you've grounded yourself, you've given yourself the motivation, and you've also helped yourself heal. So you're no longer operating out of a place of stress chemically,
Yeah.
right? You've activated different hormones in your body so that you can listen. That's part of that capacity. You're taking slow and deep breaths. Those are the skills where they seem woo-woo. And there's a place for them in spirituality, and
Yeah.
there's also a place for them in like day-to-day work. So Sharon Salzberg, Sharon or Shannon, I think it's Sharon Salzberg, has excellent material. She really pioneered loving kindness in the West in
Okay.
a more secular tradition. And she actually just came out with a book of loving kindness at work
Nice.
and finding small opportunities. So, for example, let's say that you're waiting for your test to pass,
Yeah.
right? That may take, in best case, like 30 seconds,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes it takes longer. That is an opportunity, right? May someone be happy, and you
Yeah.
can also think about who's writing who are you writing a commit for, right? That's an opportunity to practice compassion.
Yeah.
May the person who's reading this, like, find this easy, right? What can I do to help make this easy for them? And so everything about empathy springs from compassion. It is the wellspring from which it all comes. So that is always my very first recommendation, is if this feels odd and new and you're like, where the heck can I start?
Yeah.
Start with compassion, and start with compassion for yourself. And you do
Exactly.
not need your manager's permission. You do not need to ask for anybody's authority
Yeah.
to get started. You just need to do it for yourself.
Yeah.
And, observe, like act like a scientist, see kind of what changes,
Yeah.
and then you're going to be able to find opportunities. The framework that I'm putting forth, it's important to note that it's descriptive. It's what I've discovered, and this is my way of breaking down a domain from my understanding. But as we know, there are infinite permutations to break down a complex domain. This is the one that made sense for me, but I think I would encourage people to go and explore it on your own as well. Like, learn about this. The way that I'm describing things doesn't have to be like, this is the only way that it can be done. No. And I hope that it never becomes dogmatic where, but instead it's like, this is an inspiration. And if you're looking for a framework to at least get you started,
this is one way.
This is one that you might want to try that is geared for the context of developing software.
Yeah.
So that's my hope, in that it's a tool that can help people find places within their daily work where they can make a difference, and they can start to add empathy in a very concrete and specific way.
Yeah.
And instead of just thinking of empathy as something really broad, and I call it sometimes tossing empathy confetti around, where it's have empathy. Empathy is amazing, right?
I like that example.
Yeah. It's like, but then how?
Exactly. Yeah.
Tell me how. What do you mean by empathy? Like, and I think just as people in our industry are just tend to be insatiably curious and care about the details.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think people get frustrated with people like us because it's like, well, it's empathy, don't you know? It's like, well, so my hope is that I can kind of be that bridge and that translator of, yeah, here's this big messy thing, and here's how it's relevant to us in what we're doing.
Yeah, so. I think that's needed, but I love the way that you're laying it out, that it's not black and white, right? I sometimes hear, that's not me, I don't have it, but it is not that black and white. It's much more of a skill. So try out, start with yourself, right? Try small and really hone that skill, because all of a sudden, it is going to be you, right? It is a skill. It's not, it might be a final destination, I guess, if that's where you want to go. Like, it could be a goal, but it's not like anyone has it or they don't. It's something you can actually hone and you can get better at.
Yeah. The neuroscience tells us that everyone has empathy.
Yeah. And it makes sense.
And that it's a skill.
Yeah.
Right. And now there is trait empathy. So for some people, like, it may come easier than others, similar to how, like, some people are born, where running a marathon is easier for them. Right. And, there are definitely challenges. I don't want to make it sound like everybody can achieve the same level. And at the same time, empathy is incredibly individualized. There is no one correct way to be an empath or to operate with empathy. Yeah. And this was the thing that I discovered the most. I have always identified as somebody who was an empath, right? I can sense things. I'm just kind of like,
you have a good feeling about it.
I have a good feeling, and I can kind of read the room a little bit, like, and I,
Yeah.
And in some ways, that was a skill that was developed from being in sales and marketing, right? Yeah. So I got very specific training on that. So, and the other thing is, like, let's look at the character Data from Star Trek. And some people don't know who I'm talking about because I'm dating myself, but Star Trek Next Generation is the best show ever. I love it. I love it. I love it. And there's another researcher out in Stanford. His name's Jamil Zaki.
Yeah.
And he actually put forth what's called the Roddenberry hypothesis.
Okay.
Which shows, and his hypothesis is around pop culture and how much it has influenced our ideas of what empathy is. And so Data is an android. He wants to have emotion. He's actually the second generation because his predecessor Lore had a emotion chip, but ended up using it in ways that were incredibly manipulative. Right? He hurt a lot of people. So so Lore is an example of, like, you can have a lot of, like, emotion and know how people are operating, and you can cause significant harm.
Yeah, some serious damage.
That is not empathy. That's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Right? However, on the ship of the Enterprise, there's two characters, typically are diametrically opposed. So Data, who is an android, thinks very logically, right? And then also Deanna Troi, who she's half Betazoid, and so her her ability is to sense what other beings are feeling, even if she's not in the same room. So what we have done as a society is said, oh, I'm either a Data or a Diana.
Yeah.
Right? And so I was like, oh, I sense people. I'm Diana. Well, there's problems there. First of all, what Diana is doing is not actually empathying. It's projecting. When I am making an assumption about how somebody feels without having never listened to their story, what I am doing is I am injecting my own bias and I am making a presumption. And often that is rooted in a stereotype.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that is actually not good.
It's not what you want. No.
Right. Another couple of things is that Diana often gets overwhelmed. Like she experiences personal distress where she's like, I can't.
It's too much.
The feelings. And I feel that too. Right. And so, operating from personal distress sometimes can be really challenging too. Now, she does like go and take care of herself. But a lot of times people will like lean in and then they'll try to help people out of that feeling of personal distress and cause problems.
Yeah.
Now, Data, I will argue, exhibits amazing empathy.
Interesting.
Okay. I think he is incredibly, I think he's a great example for what effective empathy can be.
Interesting.
He understands his own worth. There's a great episode, Measure of a Man, and he talks about his personal boundaries. And he's like, no, I will not be subjected to this treatment because you think that I, am a machine. Right. And he defends himself. Right. And he sets really good boundaries. He is also insanely curious. And he recognizes, like, he does attunement of, I sense that you're feeling this. Is this actually what you're feeling? Right. And he's validating, like, I'm observing this. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Right. That's what we want more of. It's not necessarily about inference. Inference, if we rely on inference alone, that can go in really bad directions.
Yeah.
Right. Data also has amazing emotional regulation skills. Right. So he's not operating out of, right. Part of it is because he doesn't have the emotion chip. Right.
Yeah.
But he's able to operate from this place of clear and calm.
Yeah.
So what we're actually looking for is not for everybody to have empathy in the same way. And it shows, the science shows that that's not actually feasible, right?
Yeah.
What we're looking for is that we can all work together. And similar to, like, our brains kind of have fingerprints of how we process different information. Every single one of us has a different set of experiences that we bring to the table.
Yeah.
And so empathy at its best is recognizing that and working with people, right? So for me, I've got people in my life where it's like it's been a lot of work, like my business partner at Corey Byte specifically. We don't naturally understand each other. Like every single test that we've taken, like our thinking styles are more different than
opposites. Yeah.
We're opposites. However, we have learned to care. We have learned to, when we have a disagreement, come back and say, okay, how can we learn? How can we do better next time?
Yeah.
Right. And when we do that, then the most creative solutions are able to come out of it.
Yeah.
But if we say, oh, this is hard, this person isn't like me, I'm going to go over there. Those stupid people who like, they
you
think
make
like
it personal. That. Yeah.
Yeah, you make it personal. And then what we're doing is we're creating division, not diversity.
Yeah.
And also this work is hard. I struggle with it every day. I am no way like an empathy expert. I think if doing all of this research has taught me one thing, it's that like there is no perfect empathy.
No, I didn't think there would be, right?
Yeah.
We all do our best, right?
Yeah.
And you hone that skill, right? You start off with kind of a base level, I guess. And for some people it's higher, for some it's lower. So they might have some catching up to do. I think for me it was always higher because I'm curious and I'm a good listener. I do
Yeah.
recognize what you said in the Star Trek example, that I have caught myself projecting, and I was
Mm-hmm.
completely wrong, right? But being able
Yeah.
to step back and reflect and be like, that wasn't good. Like I don't
Yeah.
want that. So
Yeah.
if I hear other people, I'll catch them being like, you're actually just projecting, right? It doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
be like that. And for myself, I'm more cautious in that way. I listen and
Yeah.
observe before I speak my mind. And if it's wrong, I'm wrong, right? It's not
Yeah.
personal. We learn from that. We continue. Uh, that's why I also like being in that team, being in that diverse team, and I love all the people around me, right? If
Mm-hmm.
we don't like each other, we need to have a conversation because we can't operate effectively.
Right.
Decisions that we make in a business sense is gonna be a personal attack all of a sudden. Oh, this
Yeah.
person doesn't like me. And we draw
Yeah.
those two separate things, we draw them next to each other, and all of a sudden it's personal. And you never want
Yeah.
it to be personal because that's very hard to get back from.
Yeah. I've been there. I've
Yeah.
been there, and it's hard. I mean, a lot of times when I have been there, it's that I'm operating out of a defensive mode. Like
Yeah.
I'm not feeling good about my own personal situation, so I lash out. And again, it's like in those moments I was really hurting, right? And back to what I was talking about at the beginning, where it's like our brains use predictions
Yeah.
to decide how to move forward.
Yeah.
But our brains also have this tiny little moment of opportunity biologically where we can gauge whether or not our instinct is actually the action we want to take. And so
Yeah.
this is where that awareness comes in. So this is why we don't like, you know, throw our keyboard across the room every time like a test doesn't pass, right? Like
Exactly.
we do have these emotional regulation skills, and they can be developed. They are hard for a lot of us, like, but by paying attention and learning and knowing that like the neuroscience is there, like that's been something that's been really empowering for me, is just knowing like, okay, there's evidence that this is a thing that can be done.
Yeah.
It's not just this,
Kind of wishy
it's
washy.
not
Yeah.
philosophy. It's not
Exactly.
like, somebody from, 1700 said this and so therefore it's super relevant. Like it's no, like we've done a lot, sorry, we've done a lot of research, and like this is what the science is telling us.
Yeah.
We've
This is the
collected
outcome.
evidence. And so to me that's something that helps give me motivation, that and trust that if I try something that, you know it's worth it.
Yeah.
um but yeah, and there's just so much there. I could literally talk about this for days. I
I
could.
I see that. I feel
I
that.
know. So
I think we covered a lot.
we
I'm gonna
did.
have to, like, this episode really made me think. I have
Oh
so many scenarios in which things could have gone differently, or I relate to the things that the examples that you give. And I can even see that I have gotten better at it, right? Just by virtually knowing of its existence and knowing that it can be
mm-hmm.
helpful. Stepping out of, sometimes it feels like out of my body, out of the situation, and observing what I've done.
Yep.
And if I actually want to do that in the future as well,
Yep.
right? Sometimes you get a
Absolutely.
question and you're like, I would do X, Y, and Z. Uh, but being able to be like, oh, I actually did A, B, and C, and not being happy with it and acting
Yeah.
upon that, I think is very important. So I love the journey we kind of laid out. Is there anything that's still missing that you still wanted to share?
Hmm. I think just believing in you,
Hmm.
right? Like even if you don't believe in yourself right now,
Yeah.
just know that like through this research, I genuinely believe that everyone deserves compassion
Yeah.
and has the capacity to, well, not everyone. There are specific conditions that affect, less than 2% of the population that make compassion spontaneously a real challenge, right?
Yeah.
However, generally, under most circumstances, compassion is less of a trait and more of a skill. and it's something that you can learn. And even if it's hard, and even if you've been told your whole life that you don't have empathy, I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
I think that what I've seen over the years in talking to people who identify with data is that they've checked out, and they've just internalized this I'm not good at. And the reason I know that is because I did the exact same with code.
Okay.
I had internalized this, like, girls can't do math. I can't do code. I can't code. Girls can't code. Right. And that's not true.
Yeah.
Right. But it takes a lot to overcome the cultural stereotypes that have become so ingrained. But yeah, I genuinely believe that you can do it. And like, it is my mission in life to give you the tools that will help you be successful.
Yeah. I love that message. I fully stand behind it. It is a skill. And like with a lot of skills, even though you might not be apt in the beginning, as long as you keep going, make small steps, make even smaller steps, right? Be easy on yourself. Don't be too harsh. Progress is progress. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to keep progressing and you'll get there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea, for this conversation. I truly enjoyed it. I hope you did as well.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. I love talking about this stuff. So yeah,
I see that.
For the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm going to put all Andrea's stuff in the description below. Andrea Goulet. Check her out everywhere. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
You did. Yes,
awesome.
You did. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
No problem. And we'll see you on the next one then.